It's amazing how many times I hear financial advice on YouTube and think, the Bible said that first and the Bible said that better. When I was in seminary, I wrote my master's thesis on a biblical theology of debt. And what I realized is the Bible has a lot to say about this topic, but we rarely let it actually speak into this area of our lives. Today I want to share with you 10 biblical money lessons that I wish I learned sooner. Lessons straight from the Word, not Wall Street, that help me transform my financial situation and honor God with my money. The first lesson is to love your work. It's really easy for those of us in our 20s and our 30s to have these big dreams and aspirations and really do everything we can to accomplish these things with excellence. But so often we chase these dreams while sacrificing the love of the work that God has given us to do. As we look at the book of Genesis and study how is it that God has created us to be, we see that before there was sin, there was work. In Genesis 2:15, it says, "The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to keep it." That before there was sweat, before there was discomfort with work, before there was hardship in the jobs that we do, God created work to be a blessing to us. If you watch this channel, you'll know that there's nothing wrong with having dreams and aspirations in our careers and in our personal financial planning. But when we sacrifice the love of our work for the sake of those dreams, we're actually discounting the way that God has created us. A really good pastor friend of mine said once that we work so we can rest when we should rest so we can work. I think there's a lot of beauty behind that and some good lessons for us to learn about the way that we approach our work as it relates to our dreams and aspirations. The second lesson is to look to the future. While retirement wasn't a norm in the biblical times, the Bible talks a lot about preparing for the future. The book of Proverbs teaches us to leave an inheritance to our children and even our children's children. It also teaches us to imitate the ant who stores up food in the summer so they can make it through the winter time. 1 Timothy 5 tells us to provide for our household, our spouses, our kids, our grandkids, and even our parents. At some point, me and my wife looked at our situation and realized that me being in pastoral ministry means that we need to give extra attention to this focus on the future. Whether it's our retirement or wanting to buy a house one day or the hopes that we have of having kids in the future, for me and my wife to obey these scriptures means that we need to be attentive at looking towards our future. The third lesson that you may have learned from other advisors is this idea that money just makes you more of who you are. In Matthew 12, Jesus says that the good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. So it's not that getting treasure makes us evil. It's that the evil person, when they get treasures, are going to spend it in evil ways. But those of us who begin our financial journeys with biblical wisdom and a true and honest desire to honor God with our money will instead spend our treasures on good. The fourth money lesson is that God wants us to enjoy our money. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, Paul's addressing a group of people in Timothy's church who are particularly wealthy. And by comparison, if you live in a first world country and you have an iPhone, you would definitely be a part of this group here. And Paul teaches those in this group to not be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but to place their hopes on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. If we just take a moment to breathe and look around at the world around us, it's easy to see that we are really blessed in the 21st century. And oftentimes Christians have a tendency to feel guilt about the ways that we've been blessed. But it's cool to see in this chapter that God actually wants to encourage us to enjoy the things that he's allowed us to have. Not in a haughty way or an arrogant way, but in a way that praises God for the ways that he's blessed us. The fifth biblical money lesson is that pride is expensive, and we use debt to pay for it. Proverbs chapter 13 illustrates this exact culture of debt and money that we see here today. One pretends to be rich, yet has nothing. Another pretends to be poor, yet has great wealth. It is certainly true in our culture that when you see a friend with a nice car or a nice house, that you can just assume that they're swimming in debt payments. And while there are plenty of fools in our culture who pretend to be rich yet have nothing, when you turn your attention to those who are presenting as if they're poor, it's kind of crazy how oftentimes you realize those are the people who actually have wealth. And the root of this problem 9 times out of 10 is pride, that we want to present to people in a certain way that makes us feel good. And we would sacrifice financial health for the perception of it. So be wary of the fool and look at the wise man who pretends to be poor yet has great wealth. The sixth biblical money lesson is to invest your money. Especially in our country's current situation where inflation seems to be rising every single year, savers can't win anymore. Those who win are those who invest. Ecclesiastes chapter 11 says, "Invest in 7 ventures, yes, in 8, for you do not know what disaster may come upon the land." And Jesus teaches the same thing when in the parable of the talents, he scolds the man who didn't invest his money. The reality is, whether you consider this fortunate or unfortunate, is that outside of receiving an inheritance, the only way to wealth is investing. Now, whether you invest your money into a business or the housing market or the stock market is up to you. But those who save instead of investing are losing. The 7th biblical money lesson that truly started it all for me was to take personal responsibility for your finances. When I graduated from undergrad with over 6 figures of student loans, it was really easy for me to follow the pattern of this world and blame anybody except myself. I want you to think back at the last significant conversation you had with somebody about money. 9 times out of 10, the content of that conversation is, what is wrong with our government? Or what is wrong with our leaders? Or what is up with inflation these days? But so often when we actually get down to the dollars and cents of it all, we realize that if I just take responsibility for my income, I actually have a lot of capability to build wealth. Proverbs 21 says that precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. And this is the reality, that when it comes down to the actual financial decisions we make, we realize the responsibility is on us to look at our expenses and ask the question, am I spending money wisely? Biblical money lesson number 8 is to work hard at what you do. Proverbs 22 says, "Do you see a man skillful in his work? He will stand before kings." And this is one of the things that brought conviction to me as I thought about the work ethic that I have at everything that I do. In the New Testament, they didn't have 9 to 5s. They worked from sunup till sundown every single day of the week, with one exception of the Sabbath, if you were a Jew. There were no holidays. There were no vacations. There were no sick days. If you got ill to the point where you couldn't actually work, you were dependent on your friends and your family to financially support you in that season. I want to think about how hard these people in the first century had to work. And I compare it to our culture today, it's easy to feel a lot of conviction about my work ethic. I think about the laziness and the slothfulness of our culture and the ways that we're kind of constantly seeking to be entertained by social media or other medias. It's certainly a blessing that we don't have to work in the same way that they did in the first century. But I still want to honor God in the verses that teach me to work hard at what I do. If you're liking this content, I ask that you would like and subscribe so I can keep making videos just like this one. Money lesson number 9 is that generosity is a beautiful thing. Acts 2:45-46 talks about how the early church would give to one another. It says, "And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. And day by day, attending the temple together and breaking bread in their homes, they received their food with glad and generous hearts." I constantly look back and remember the blessings that people gave me when I was in a season of financial need. But as me and my wife look back at this last year, it's honestly just humbling to see how God has flipped everything on its head, and now we're the ones being a financial blessing to others. And this is truly, as we see in Acts 2, one of the coolest parts about being part of the church. That if you're a part of a really healthy church, you can be a mutual blessing to one another. The 10th biblical money lesson is that there is only one heaven. Hebrews 13 says, "For here we have no lasting city, but we seek the city that is to come." It's really easy for us to believe that a certain vacation or maybe our retirement will be able to fulfill the desires that we have for heaven. The truth of it, though, is that the desires that we have for a great vacation or a great retirement are often just our natural desires for heaven. Now, this doesn't discount the beauty in saving for retirement or for vacations. But I guess I've just had this recognition this year that if I think my retirement is going to solve all my problems, then I'm going to be sorely disappointed. And the Bible informs so much of our personal financial management. But one area that it's particularly impacted for me has been this financial anxiety that I've wrestled with over the years. And in this video, I share about how the Bible helped me overcome these financial anxieties and how it can help you do the same. So click here and I'll see you there.